Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Daryl Grove. I am not joined by Taylor Rockwell today. He is taking a well-earned day off. He's been putting in a lot of time on the Total Soccer Show lately. But I'm here and I have a really great guest. Today's guest is Joe Lowery. You may know him as @JoeInCleats on Twitter, where he does all kinds of great tactical analysis of all kinds of soccer. You may know him from his column with The Athletic Soccer, where he writes a weekly review of Major League Soccer from a sort of tactical perspective. And that's what we're doing today. Joe and I are going to talk about the weekend that just happened in Major League Soccer from a sort of tactical, analytical vantage point. We're going to be talking in detail about Atlanta's win over New England Revolution, Seattle's win over Toronto, and a few other games as well. We don't hit every team. Apologies that we don't get to every team. The league is just too big, but we cover a lot of the action in MLS. In the middle of today's show, there's a special pre-recorded appearance from Mr. Taylor Rockwell. We're doing one of our ad segments right in the middle of this show. The question is all about David Beckham. Was he actually any good? To get that answer, just listen in. You will hear it. If you're looking for our Champions League coverage, obviously we won't be reviewing the Tuesday Champions League games today because Taylor is out of office. We should be back on Wednesday with a full review of the Tuesday games and also the Wednesday games. Okay, let's talk some Major League Soccer. I am joined once again by Joe Lowery. Joe, welcome back again to the Total Soccer Show.
Thanks, Daryl. It's great to be here. I'm excited.
So this week, we're not going to be doing a big tactical overview. We're more doing a review of the week that just happened, the week that was.
That's right. That's right.
Or the weekend that was. Lots of interesting incidents and little tactical moments. So I'm really excited to dig into it with you. I want to start with Houston, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
All right. So Houston beat San Jose 2-1. And the first thing I saw about this game was your tweet that Alberth Elis is a man-marking system's worst nightmare. And I thought, okay, that's an interesting concept. And then I saw the Alberth Elis goal and I thought, aha, I see what Joe's saying. So would you mind talking us through why Alberth Elis is a man-marking system's worst nightmare and why that's particularly bad for San Jose?
So Alberth Elis is probably one of the quickest players, both over 5 yards and then over like half a field.
That's
MLS.
Interesting, right? Because there's a difference between acceleration and sort of top-end pace that you can
Exactly.
sustain.
Elis can sort of accelerate really quickly away from his marker, and then he can also beat either that same marker or multiple defensive players over a longer period, a longer span on the field. So Elis, I think we saw it a couple of times. Well, we saw it probably too many times for Mateus Almeida's sake, but we saw it over and over again against San Jose of Elis just causing all sorts of problems with his speed, and not only with his speed, but also with his movement. I think he had a really good understanding of what spaces to occupy and sort of what angles to take to confuse his marker when he was off the ball.
Yeah.
So I think at least we did see it on that first goal for Houston, that really long counterattack, like almost that full field sort of counter.
The unfortunate defender was Jackson Ewell, right?
Yeah, he got absolutely roasted. That was I felt a little bit bad because I don't know, what are you supposed to do in that situation? I mean, you have to have some sort of defensive cover to stop Elis in the open field, and the way San Jose is set up just really doesn't provide that.
So what I really liked about it as well, the smart thing I think Elis did is once he's obviously beaten Ewell for pace on the touchline, essentially, right? He does that thing that I love, and I know Taylor loves as well, where once a player goes past someone, if they can then use their body to sort of put the player behind them so that there's no way they can run around them, you know what I'm saying, to close the angle. And from that moment, Ewell's just completely gone, right? And even, isn't there a 1-2? Doesn't Ewell play it, Elis plays it out wide to Manotas?
Yeah, I believe there's a little combination at the end.
And you're still desperately trying to catch up with Elis, but there's just no chance.
No chance.
And then Elis is involved in the second goal as well, if I'm correct.
Yes, yeah. There's a little nice combination between Houston's main three attackers, I believe, and Manotas, and then Thomas Martinez and Elis. They press a little bit to win the ball in San Jose's half, and then it's just a really quick combination play in the box, and Martinez scores in, I think, the 60th minute.
Yeah, and I think it's Lopez was the defender. He is all set for a foot race to the end line with Alberth Elis. and Alberth Elis just simply squares it. So I think that's a really good example of using not your actual pace, but just the looming threat of your pace to make a defender back off, and then you can just play a nice, simple square pass.
Being fast makes everything else easier.
It sure does. And I want to zero in on your point about the man marking system. Obviously, this is what Almeida's doing with San Jose. We talked last time about how maybe he could get it right eventually, but is it the case that if you're up against a player like Elis who can beat someone 1v1, that the whole system will just break down?
I think it might actually be the case. I think you could actually be correct, because I frankly don't see a way, unless you have maybe near perfect on-ball pressure when Elis is off the ball or when a player like Elis is off the ball. I don't see how you deny him consistent service or how you deny him even counterattacking situations like we saw against San Jose. So maybe at that point we look at Almeida's system and it actually does need a little bit of adapting. Maybe it needs to evolve a little bit to maybe input a little bit of zonal marking into the mix as well to combine those two things, and maybe at that point you provide a little extra cover.
So it doesn't
have to be all over the field.
Yeah, maybe we assume that the success Almeida has had, I mean, he's faced fast players in Liga MX, right? So he must have had some sort of plan to deal with someone who's just too quick to contain and too smart to contain.
Exactly, and maybe that's because maybe he did have that plan, and the other 10 players or the other 9 field players for San Jose couldn't quite cover for Elis's defender. But yeah, it'll be interesting to keep an eye, because I think San Jose do play more. I mean, there are other attackers that are going to be difficult to deal with for them the rest of the season. So it'll be interesting to see if we do see any visible, noticeable tactical changes in those games.
So let's shift gears to a coach who finally things seem to go right for him. It was New England Revolution 0, so it's not Brad Friedel. Atlanta United 2. Frank de Boer gets what I believe is his first win in Major League Soccer, and his first league win for a good few years. That's
right. Yeah, it was. Yeah, the Revs struggled, and Atlanta actually played quite well. So credit to de Boer for his setup, definitely.
I read in your Athletic piece that essentially you feel like Frank de Boer has this system of, slow possession, try and unsettle the opposition. It's almost like a bad version of what Berhalter does. And what Atlanta were good at last year was more like quick transitions, right? And that, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm kind of paraphrasing your own article here. I think what you said there was essentially because Friedel went out and tried to press and be aggressive, he almost forced Atlanta to play the way maybe they should be playing anyway.
Yeah, I really did question Brad Friedel's thought process a little bit. I think you laid it out pretty well. I mean, we saw Atlanta really struggle against the Union a few weeks ago. They had a bye week last week, and they played Columbus the week before in like a slip and slide sort of. So that shouldn't quite take away too many tactical takeaways from that. But we saw Atlanta really struggle to do much with their positioning and possession against Philadelphia, and it really looked like the players just weren't quite comfortable creating chances in the attacking half once they had built the ball up the field. So I think coming back into this game against the Revolution and really going up against a team that's in your face and really doesn't let you think, doesn't let you overthink, was kind of exactly what Atlanta United needed. Because you look at their players, especially their attackers, and you look at Tito Villalba, who's great at getting it behind, and his off-ball movement was just fantastic in this game. Greswell's got some speed, and then Barco as well is quick in the middle of the field, or if he gets out on probably that left wing. I mean,
and why would you give Joseph Martinez space to run into, right?
Exactly.
You just ask him for it.
I don't know why he played that.
I know he didn't score, but I know he wasted a few chances as well. But that seems like just the opposite of what Brad Friedel should have done. So I'm really confused by why he would do this. I mean, why do you think he did this?
The only thing I can really think of is that Friedel thought his team was a good enough pressing team to go up against Atlanta, who had not been in great form, who was coming off of a bye week, and maybe say, yeah, we're going to take it to them. We're going to punch them in the mouth.
I see.
And
they thought they were Mike Tyson.
Exactly. As it turns out, New England isn't good enough, and probably those of us on the outside would have said that from the beginning, but being inside that locker room, maybe he had a different perspective.
So is there any chance that Frank de Boer looks at this game and says, oh, I see what we're good at. Maybe we should do this instead?
I hope so, but I'm not entirely optimistic that we'll see an immediate shift to being more transition-based, which I think is probably what Atlanta would be best at. Not that they can't possess, not that they can't create chances from that, but we just haven't seen it yet. But then again, it also has to be said that New England were aggressive, and not every team against Atlanta will be. Right. Some teams will sit deeper, so Atlanta will have to break them down in possession. But all that to say, I'd really like to see more of Atlanta playing a little bit more direct and playing quicker in transitions, but I guess only time will tell.
Yeah, the weird thing for me just watching this is I remember just enjoying it and thinking, oh yeah, this is what it was like. It was fun to watch Atlanta last year, and I'm not an Atlanta fan by any stretch, right? I'm a neutral, but I enjoy watching teams go at other teams. So to see a team be aggressive in transition and be really exciting, it reminded me of what last year was like watching Atlanta.
Yeah, it was fun. It was fun. Even for just a week, it was fun.
The other big news from this game, obviously, and it got most of the headlines, right? Not weirdly, more than the tactics, it's Ezequiel Barco, the $15 million man, gets 2 goals, one of which was obviously very highlight reel worthy. And it feels like maybe this was his big coming out party.
I hope so, right? I mean, it feels like we've been waiting for Barco's coming out party for forever now. I remember, when his transfer was announced and looking at how an exciting player, like how he looked like a really exciting player, and hoping that he could impact Atlanta when they had Almiron as well in that midfield, wondering what that duo would be capable of. And now Almiron's moved on and they've signed Pity Martinez, but he's been in and out of the lineup a little bit with, I think, an injury at some point. But it feels like the keys are kind of in Barco's pocket right now. And so I'm really hoping that he's going to, get him out of his pocket and actually put him in the ignition and see if he can move this team forward, because he's, as a neutral, again, I think it's fair to say, like, he's a fun player to watch when he's playing well and he has the ball at his feet. He's almost electric at times. So I think he could be, again, if we see Atlanta maybe go a little bit more transition oriented in their attack, he could be a great player to sort of feed the ball to as well in the final third, and maybe even play through a little bit. I don't think you play through him in the same way that Atlanta played through Almiron, but I think Barco is good at finding space in that attacking third especially. He's one of the players who I think is most suited to playing a final ball or to finding some space in that area against a compact defense as well. So
yeah,
I'm really
actually,
hoping that...
I think the best example of that, sorry to cut you off, I wanted to just
you're fine.
To get this in is, I know that the second goal, right, where he bends it from the left side into the top right corner is obviously the highlight reel worthy one. But I took a real look at his first goal, which opened the scoring, and he does this really clever thing where he finds some space as Villalba's going down the left wing. He finds some space, and then he makes this, like, I only noticed it on like the 5th replay. He makes this fake near post run that Anibaba totally bites on and goes to cut out. And that's the reason that he's wide open for that cutback from Villalba. And it just made me realise that, this isn't some punk, right? Like, because I'd thought of him in a maybe negative way because of all the stuff with, the teammates' girlfriends and so on. Right. This is a guy who really understands how to manipulate space. And he's a really smart soccer player. So that was a big moment for me to realise, this kid understands how to work the space.
I totally agree. I think his understanding of space and Villalba's as well, if they get a chance to combine a little bit like we saw on that goal, they both are good, smart players and understand how to manipulate defenders. So that could be something to keep an eye on for Atlanta if we see them paired together a little bit on that side.
What do you make of the fact that Barco didn't start this game and de Boer only subbed him in because of the head injury to Eric Remedy? Is this just everything just happening to fall de Boer's way today?
Maybe a little bit. I didn't have a huge problem with Barco not starting, just because, I can sort of get the idea of having Nagbe maybe be that outlet a little bit in transition. He's not great at playing the final ball, but I think he keeps the ball well, which might be something that de Boer was looking for against a press. Yeah. But it worked out really well for de Boer, and maybe we'll see a change reflected in next week's lineup for Atlanta, and Barco will be in there.
Well, speaking of next week's lineup, I believe Atlanta's next game is against FC Dallas.
Ooh, that'll be good.
I'm really excited for that game because I've been, as a sort of play your kids proponent, I guess is the word. I've obviously been enjoying what Luchi Gonzalez is doing at FC Dallas. They beat Portland Timbers 2-1. This week, with a goal from Jesus Ferreira and a performance from Paxton Pomykal, and Reggie Cannon was in there. We forget that he's still a youngster, right? Edwin Cirillo, is it Cirillo or Carrillo? I'm not sure. Was also playing. So, like, Thomas Roberts on the bench and Jacori Hayes as well. It was the FC Dallas Youth Revolution getting a win one more time, right? I'm not sure how much you saw of this, but they took the lead 2-0. then conceded a late-ish goal to Portland and looked a little nervy. And it reminded me a lot of last week, I think, when they threw away a lead against Philly and ended up losing 2-1. So my question for you about Dallas was, what is going on there? Why are they do they look so impressive when you see the highlight reels, especially if you're watching like a Paxton Pomykal all touches kind of thing? But why do they keep struggling to hold on to leads?
So Armand Kafai, who covers FC Dallas for Pro Soccer USA, had an article earlier, or maybe late last week, that was talking about Dallas's game against Philadelphia and how they were pinned back a little bit in their low block, and how that's not really how they want to play. And I think against Portland, we saw some of those same themes a little bit. I don't think we saw Dallas in their low block as much. Portland didn't threaten as much with the ball as Philadelphia did later on in the game, but we still saw a real defensive breakdown on Portland's goal. It was like late in the 60s, somewhere in the like 65th, 67th minute.
My vague memory is there's a lot of room for that cross to come in.
There was a lot of room, and I went back and watched that goal a couple of times after I watched the game and sort of tried to figure out what was wrong with the defensive structure. And I think it was actually a pretty simple breakdown. Portland moved the ball a little bit from side to side. They rotated it in possession from left to right, and then the final ball ended up coming from the left side. And Dallas's block just didn't shift quite fast enough. They didn't close to the ball fast enough, and then they didn't mark the back post runner, the second runner to the back post either. So I think it's some simple structural problems that FC Dallas are having with their low block right now, and I'm hopeful that, as someone who likes to watch this team, that they will eventually figure that out and that they'll be able to focus more on their play with the ball and have to worry less about their defensive structure. But right now, I think for opposing teams looking to play against FC Dallas, they're going to try to punish them in their low block. So
to throw up a couple of theories, is there a chance that some of that sort of failure to transition and stay organised when it shifts is maybe due to the youth of the side, like so many relatively inexperienced players, or is that too simple of an answer?
You know what? I'd like to say an answer one way or the other, but I can actually see both sides of that. I can see, maybe the kids aren't quite as comfortable defending back in later game situations. But then at the same time, a lot of these kids have probably drilled defending in a low block over and over again since they were little. Yeah. Or maybe not little, but at least for years now. So I actually don't know. Those are both fair. Those are both fair theories.
What about the idea that, say, so I'm not as familiar with, say, Barrios and Aranguiz, who are the right side and left side players, but I think of them as very attacking players and not necessarily defensive players. Is there a chance that maybe just their wide players are not that defensively gifted or defensive minded?
I think I'd be more inclined to agree with you on that one. I don't. Okay. Like you're saying, I'm not super familiar with Barrios or Aranguiz outside of the few times I've seen Dallas this season, but I think they are more attacking players, which is what Luchi Gonzalez wants. So having them maybe as weak links and wide areas, and if someone who watches FC Dallas religiously for the last few years wants to correct us on that would be great. But I think that would probably be my leaning as well.
And then looking ahead, so next Saturday it's Atlanta hosting FC Dallas. How do you see that going? Because Dallas like to press a little bit, right? And Dallas like to have the ball. So I don't see them sitting in a low block and frustrating Atlanta. Or do you think Luchi Gonzalez will look at what happened to Brad Friedel and think, let's maybe try something else?
Dallas are in a tough situation, right? Because we've seen their low block struggle a little bit the last 2 weeks. Yeah. It almost makes that look like, if we sit deep, Atlanta will probably punish us like we saw them do in the playoffs last year. Or if we press up a little bit like the Revolution did, then they'll just play over us or they'll play through us. So I don't know. What I would probably sit a little deeper, at least at the beginning of the game, and let Atlanta try to beat themselves. But, if that isn't working, you got to flip the switch really quickly and apply some pressure. So It's a tough tactical decision for Luchi Gonzalez. That's a really interesting question.
It makes it an interesting game, right? Because we don't know how that's going to go, and I feel like it could really open up and be wild and fascinating to watch, or it could be one team bunkering and Atlanta doing their Frank de Boer slow, steady kind of thing.
Yeah, I'll be watching. That's for sure.
More from my conversation with Joe Lowery in just a few minutes. We don't know how many minutes because I'm joined by Taylor Rockwell. Hello.
Hello. I didn't want to talk to Joe, but I did want to talk to you.
It's weird that you've just been sitting there listening.
I mean, it's what I do. I keep my thoughts to myself. I don't do that. That's how you know that this is all lies.
Yeah, if Taylor was here, you'd hear him. Right? But you are here now for what we call the Ad question ad segment. So we've got a SeatGeek ad for you.
Yeah.
Then we've got a question about Mr. David Beckham, Sir David Beckham.
Yeah.
Then we've got another ad, a Wix ad on today's show.
Is he knighted? I actually don't know.
I don't know either. Okay, let's Google this before we start.
He is definitely some Order of the British Empire or member of the British Empire status. I don't know if he's a full knight yet.
I should know.
And I emphasize yet. He's not knighted. He can't be knighted. But I'm gonna guess OBE.
So I've Googled, and you're correct. OBE in 2003. I'm going to guess he got it for the free kick against Greece that got England to the World Cup.
You think so?
Maybe.
That could be. That wouldn't surprise me. It does seem like there
Not
are
for his Miami activities. I know
weirdly specific moments tend to get you recognized by the British nobility.
Yeah, it's almost as if it's not really a meritocracy.
Almost.
All right, today's show is sponsored by...
Meghan Markle earned her status. How dare you?
I mean, she did. Today's show is sponsored by SeatGeek. Speaking of live events, like if you'd have wanted to go to that game at Old Trafford where David Beckham scored that free kick, you couldn't have gone back then because SeatGeek wasn't invented.
You could not have.
Tickets were all weird and complicated.
Do you think there were tickets available on SeatGeek to either of the royal weddings?
I doubt it.
I'll put it this way.
Someone would have got in a lot of trouble if they were selling their tickets on SeatGeek.
That makes sense. But if there were tickets for sale, you could have found them on SeatGeek. That's how powerful and all-reaching SeatGeek is. I've been looking for non-soccer things. I've been looking at John Mulaney. We were talking about John Mulaney and Pete Davidson are on tour. Shows
the bizarrest tour of all time.
It definitely is. Shows in Easton, Pennsylvania and Baltimore, Maryland. But then also John Mulaney and Bill Hader are performing in New York. It's a lot of East Coast stuff, a little bit in California as well.
John Mulaney is living his best life.
He really
right
is.
Now.
He really is.
What's the John Mulaney Pete Davidson show called? Is it called We're Friends Somehow?
It should be. Or I'm going to say like Pete Davidson under supervision, like something like that.
So tickets for that are available on SeatGeek?
Yes, they sure are. Yes. If you are living on the East Coast and have some money to spend, you can get those tickets and see those gentlemen perform live.
If you want to know a little more about SeatGeek, it's a ticket company where the customer comes first.
All right.
They have more than 50,000 five-star reviews. That's more than us, Taylor. That's
unacceptable.
Yeah.
Unacceptable, but also understandable.
Let's try and catch him up.
Okay.
Let's try and catch him
Should be easy. They're focused on making your experience as easy as possible. They pull in millions of tickets from all over the web. They rate each deal on a scale of 1 to 10 and display them on an interactive seat map so it's simple to find what you're looking for.
And best of all, you can get $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Here's how you do it. You use the promo code TSS.
That checks out.
You get $10 off your first purchase.
Also checks
and you
out.
can use that for concert tickets, sports, comedy, and whoever John Mulaney is touring with.
There we go. Remember, that's promo code TSS for $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. Thank you very much to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's episode.
Remember, SeatGeek supports our show, so if you support them, you'll be supporting us.
Hey, there we go. Synergy, I think. Is that what that means?
That's the correct use of synergy.
There we go. Now we've got a question coming from Shreyas Ramani, who asks, or says, David Beckham might be remembered more for his off-field accomplishments than his on-field accomplishments, but how good was he really?
This is a great question.
It is.
This is one of those things that maybe you and I have always loved to talk about, but no one's asked it before.
Yeah, it's a scratch-the-surface question, where once you have to think about it deeper than that, it gets really nuanced and confusing.
So I'm going to agree with the premise, Shreyas' premise that Beckham is going to be remembered more for his off-field activities because he just became, from the late 90s to now, this super famous, good-looking celebrity dude who I think people who didn't watch soccer or aren't that interested in soccer know who he is and have an opinion about him, and usually a positive opinion.
I mean, my wife knew about him in middle school, high school.
There we go.
I was watching the.
He's like a K-pop band.
Yeah, kind of. Because his wife was.
Did you see SNL? Yeah.
Oh, no, I did not.
There was a BTS. It was a K-pop band that I'd never heard of, but I saw them perform and I was like, oh, I get why people are crazy into this band.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not see them perform. I saw Weekend Update mention them and the entire crowd erupted.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. But I remember I was watching the Adele Carpool Karaoke with James Corden.
Yeah.
And she was talking about how important the Spice Girls were to her, and it was girl power, and it was these women doing it and getting out, and even that he then married Posh Spice, that made him that much more visible to a different entire different community who don't watch soccer. And so I think for those reasons he does kind of stand in this level of celebrity above just what Lionel Messi will be, because he's one of, if not the greatest players ever, but it's that it still doesn't kind of broach into those other areas of celebrity.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And yet his on-field accomplishments are huge.
Yep.
I would say that David Beckham genuinely was one of the best players in the world for a good few years, even if he wasn't quite Zinedine Zidane or original Ronaldo?
I think that's the confusing aspect, is that like because he was so good at a very specific set of things.
That's it. That's what I wrote down.
He doesn't really like you don't look at him as this all-around player. It's why when he moved to LA and he was suddenly going to be playing in the middle, there were questions because it was like, but that's not what he does.
He ended up back on the wing, right?
He did, exactly. And I think that's why, is because he was so good at long passing, at crossing, and at free kicks, set pieces. That was like I think he might be one of the best I've ever seen, at least in my lifetime.
So did you go back and rewatch some footage? I'm going to guess you did,
of course,
because I know you.
Yeah.
I did the same thing this morning. And I was reminded of just how accurate his long passes and crosses were.
Yeah.
And I actually think because of his celebrity and things like Bend It Like Beckham, right? The title of the movie, Bend It Like Beckham, and kind of the focus on his free kicks, that people only think of his free kicks. But what people don't think about is the technique, precision, and accuracy of his passes mostly from the right side of the field, but from all over the field, right? There are so many perfectly weighted through balls that you see Andy Cole or original Ronaldo running onto, right? There are so many crosses where he didn't really have room to cross, and he just took like one touch, opened up a bit of space, and then hit this perfectly bending ball that evades everybody and lands at the far post. And it's clearly been aimed onto someone's left foot as they're running in from the left. His accuracy was beyond belief, and I think we're saying the same thing, that he was probably the best in the world at doing that stuff for a long time.
I'm glad you used the word accuracy, because that was the word I left out when I went like hyperbolic as we sometimes do, and we're saying like, oh, it's so good, the ball had eyes, he could find all these, and that's what it was. It was the accuracy, and that stands out to me as being so important, because it's not just like, oh, he could find a player in open space. It's just that he could find a player in that tiny little bit of open space.
There are so many passes I see where there's barely a gap. There's two defenders, and he lands it sort of on the toe of the forward as he's rushing in on goal. And no one else in the world could do that as consistently as David Beckham. And I actually think, from what I've read about him, it's a lot about practice.
That makes sense.
He just perfected it through practice.
Yeah. I mean, you get that idea that like that was all he did, was practice those things over and over again, because he's not going to be the fastest player. He's not going to be the biggest player. So you work on those things that maybe come naturally to you a little bit, but then you develop over time.
Can you remember, like, I can't remember any like real tricks and skills and step overs. It was always just maybe a cut, like a cut here or there just to open up a bit of space. And it was always to create space for either the shot, his shooting was incredible, or a pass or a cross. And it's, in a weird way, that's like a limited version of a footballer, because Cristiano Ronaldo or Messi can take the ball and dribble at people and beat 5 people, but it ends up being super, super effective, especially when he has the right teammates. I'm thinking especially of like Ruud van Nistelrooy, was always on the end of a load of Beckham crosses. Yeah.
I mean, Ruud van Nistelrooy, very good, but definitely made to look all the better because of the service he got. But like, it's also not surprising then when you think about his off-field celebrity and the sort of like kind of like measured like approach there seems to have been, in terms of like we're kind of focused on branding. If you're the Beckhams, I'm doing we now for some reason, but like that comes from a ton of repetition and practice, and probably for Victoria as well, a lot of repetition and practice in her life. And so I think that's makes sense then why there is this kind of enduring celebrity around him. But I also want to talk about, like, you're absolutely right, there wasn't a lot of stepovers, there wasn't like roulettes all the time, but there was like disguise on a lot of what he would do. Like there was a lot of like really nice like outside of the foot passes that people didn't see coming, or like little lifted passes or one-touch lifted passes that I think like just showed his technical ability as well.
The other thing I think is worth really focusing on with David Beckham is his competitiveness. If you think of the idea of Beckham as a celebrity player, he would be exactly the type of person that, say, Roy Keane, who was famously hyper-focused on everyone has to be super serious, winning is everything. Roy Keane loved playing with David Beckham. He was never felt that Beckham's celebrity distracted or allowed him to not focus fully on soccer, right? I think that's incredible. And then, do you know the thing about Real Madrid with Capello? When Beckham's contract wasn't going to be renewed at Real Madrid, and he signed the contract with the LA Galaxy to join MLS, Capello had taken over at Real Madrid. Season wasn't going well. In January, he said, Beckham's done. He's played his last game for Real Madrid.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Forced his way back into the team, scored an equaliser on his re-debut when he was allowed back in the team, I think from a free kick, and then was a key part of a Real Madrid team that won the La Liga title, the only title, the La Liga title that Beckham won while he was there. So I think there's a lot of people like Capello would underestimate Beckham's competitiveness, professionalism, and all that kind of stuff, and Beckham always comes through, right?
I forgot about that change in narrative, that it went from he's coming to Major League Soccer because he's out of favor at Madrid. And they don't really want him anymore. Maybe he's passed it to suddenly he's this integral player and they're winning the title. And maybe there was even rumor that they were going to try to keep him or like get him back out of the deal.
I went back and reread this. Yes, they tried to undo the LA Galaxy MLS deal and get David Beckham to stay at Real Madrid. And then following on, it started badly at the LA Galaxy, right? I think he was injured and maybe shouldn't have played that
I've read the book.
season.
Yeah.
The Beckham experiment, of course, went well. He ends up winning a bunch of MLS Cups.
Yep.
Yeah, Beckham made a success of his time in MLS after a really rough start.
Yeah. But like the other thing that will forever stand out for me about David Beckham, though, is the free kick ability.
Of course.
And
I like to think of that as all one word.
As well it should. Maybe this is my bias. I don't know if it is, but I can't think of a player who, if I were the opposition, I would be more afraid of standing over a ball like 20 to 25 yards out than David Beckham. And the one that will always stand out to me is the Greece free kick.
Yes.
That it's just like the most clutch free kick at the most opportune moment.
Yep.
And that is sort of what you would expect from him, again, because of the accuracy, because of the dedication and the practice. He has then that accuracy and that ability to perform.
The final thing I would like to say about David Beckham is it turns out, in terms of off-field stuff, he seems like actually quite a nice man.
Yeah.
Have you seen the statue thing with James Corden?
Yes, I have. Yes.
So I was really impressed. If people haven't seen this, there is the statue unveiling at the LA Galaxy Stadium. I can't remember what it's called now. Is it StubHub, Home Depot?
Yeah, StubHub Home Depot Center.
The one in Carson.
Of California.
So there's the great David Beckham statue outside of it now. There was a prank on the James Corden show where they were showing him a preview of the statue, and it was, I know you know this, I'm telling our listeners, and his face was all messed up, and his arms were too long, and his bum was gigantic. And he was very polite, but also very clear that this is not going out in public.
Yeah. it's assured assertiveness is what I'm going to say.
Yeah.
But even I remember the Ali G benefit where he was on there and he's a good sport, even though I think he gets continuously made fun of. He still rolls with it. But it is a weird thing for me that I was doing the math on this, and I think sometimes players who do specific things very well do endure versus I was thinking about Kenny Dalglish because he was on screen the Hillsborough disaster memorial this weekend, and I was thinking about how he was an amazing goal scorer. He then became an amazing coach, but it kind of fades unless you were alive in that time period. And now you think of him as Liverpool legend, and that's kind of it. But if there's a special moment or a skill, Cruyff stands out for many reasons, but the idea that there is the Cruyff turn, it makes him that much more enduring in your memory. And I think Beckham would be one of those players who maybe continues to stand out because of those individual skills.
Yeah.
But then because of everything off the field, that sort of fades away and is way easier to forget than you would think it should be.
Yeah, I think it goes to the original premise of the question, right? That his off-field stuff maybe it's so big that it overshadows all the incredible stuff he did on the field.
I have one weird disclaimer, though. I do think that he was a kind of product of his time where if you watch those Manchester United teams, it is a lot of...
late 90s, 2000s?
It is a lot of long switches and long diagonals and 4-4-2 and finding those long balls on the counter. And it's also the case that while he is very good at quickly playing those balls, I don't know if he would be as good in a high-pressure gegenpress system or if he was playing against it. He might be a little bit challenged.
That's a fascinating thought experiment. I would guess, though, that when the high presses come in, if he can find a way to avoid or evade that first bit of pressure, there's more space in behind for him to hit someone. Yeah. So it could go either way. I don't want to disagree with you, but I'd like to see it.
There we go.
Let's get him back on the field.
Okay.
Get Beckham back on the field.
Why not?
Make him play against Liverpool.
Yeah. And I would say one thing that I...
Make him play against RB Leipzig.
Let's do it. Yeah. I'm good with that. One thing I do see a lot of times when it comes to Beckham and his legacy is I do see people wondering well, then why would Manchester United let him go? If they are one of, if not the biggest clubs at the time, why would you sell him on?
Because Real Madrid?
Because Real Madrid, and I think also there's the Ferguson idea of nobody bigger than the club, and I think that he kind of at the time was embracing the branding and the hair and all that stuff. So I think that it's impossible to remove that aspect of him from the conversation. But when you try to and you look at just what he could do, he was one of the best players in that era, for sure.
I think the cherry on top is that Ferguson eventually didn't exactly apologize, but congratulated him on his accomplishments and maybe recognized that this is a new type of celebrity footballer that I wasn't quite ready to understand. Right?
Yeah,
not quite an apology.
Imagine Fergie was really up on the times.
Yeah, but not quite an apology, but as much as you'll get from Fergie.
Yeah, that's about right. That's about right.
So there we go. I hope we've answered Trace's question. If you've got a question for us, it's totalsoccershow.com/questions. Send them in.
I have an addendum to this question.
Oh yeah.
Is there a chance that the Miami venture ends up hurting his legacy? Because if it continues to sort of go the way it's gone and they end up staying in Fort Lauderdale and it kind of slowly comes together and it doesn't
feel... They could mow that field.
I mean, I'm just do you feel like there's a chance that comes back to bite him a little bit?
I mean... Yes, maybe because he'll be associated with the venture that didn't go well, but it won't take away the assists and the free kicks and the long passes and that goal against Crystal Palace from the halfway line, and all that will still be on YouTube.
I forgot about that goal. I forgot about that. I'm going to go watch that again once we're done with this. But before we can be done with this, we should talk about today's sponsor, Wix. New sponsor alert.
New sponsor alert. Hello, Wix. Welcome to the Total Soccer Show. So long-time listeners will know that we used to be sponsored by a different website.
Round Universe.
Company. Yes. Wix is our new sponsor, and we're very excited because it means we're going to create a spin-off website using Wix.
For what possible product, Daryl?
Well, we've got to be a little bit careful because we don't want to fully reveal it yet. But Taylor and I have been working on a thing. It was interrupted because of everything that happened with me in January, but it's half ready to launch, right?
Half ready.
It's half ready to launch. We're very excited about it. It's a special spin-off project. It's just me and Taylor. It's not the Total Soccer Show, but it's a bit like the Total Soccer Show. And we're hoping to launch it in the next couple of months at least. We're going to build a website for it using Wix.
But our experience is common. Life gets in the way. Stuff happens. But Wix can take care of a lot of the heavy lifting for you. They offer reliable hosting to keep your website safe and secure, custom domains and mailboxes, and email marketing, much, much more.
We'll also have total creative freedom, so we're going to make sure that this new website for this new secret spin-off project is going to look a little different to our regular website.
What do you mean when you say different?
I don't know yet because we haven't designed it yet.
You're going to make it weird and all over the place?
I mean, no, hopefully not. Hopefully Wix, the tools on Wix, will make sure that I can't make it weird and all over the place. So what's going to happen is, as part of the sponsorship, we're going to sort of update you on how it's going and talk you through how we've created the new site and when it launches as part of the Wix sponsorship. If you'd like to create your own website, you can get started for free at wix.com/TSS. That's wix.com/TSS. And then apply the code TSS at checkout and you'll get 10% off when upgrading to premium.
Upgrading to premium, 10% off. That's the way to do it. That's what David Beckham would do.
He would
upgrade to premium immediately.
By staying behind after practice.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And shouting wix.com/TSS every time you hit a crossing.
To get that extra 10%.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Ole Gunnar Solskjaer would be saying, "Can I just go home, David? Can I please just go home?" And he'd say, "No, get on the end of another cross."
No, he'd say it much more politely than that. Because I don't think he can be in any way mean, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer.
So thank you to Wix for sponsoring today's show. Thank you to SeatGeek as well. Let's get back to my interview with Joe Lowery. All right, the big game I think this week, I know it got your attention, was Seattle Sounders hosting Toronto FC, and we got 5 goals out of it. It was 3-2 to Seattle. I want to start with Jozy Altidore, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely. So
Jozy has now scored in every game he's played this season, right? All 4 games. He got 2 against Seattle, even though he was on the losing team. And I'm looking at this from a US men's national team perspective of just, you hear so many people be down on Jozy and they're ready for just Josh Sargent to step in and retire Jozy before he's even 30. And I feel like this game was a reminder of what Jozy's capable of.
Absolutely. It's impossible to look. I mean, at least I think it's impossible to look at Jozy Altidore and his play against. I mean, you look at Seattle. Seattle is a good, very, very good MLS team. And, you see Jozy Altidore score 2 goals. I have a hard time believing he's not the best striker in the pool right now.
I agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I want to focus people's attention maybe on that first goal. It's Pozzuelo who crosses it for Jozy Altidore. It's a beautiful ball from Pozzuelo, but if you rewatch, Jozy has identified the space to the right of Chad Marshall, and I think it's Brad Smith, the left back, and he keeps pointing there, literally telling Pozzuelo where he wants it to go, and he's doing it in a way where Chad Marshall can't see where he's pointing. So that to me is like that elite striker type stuff of just knowing there's this 2 yards, maybe 1.5 yards of space, and I know that my new teammate can drop a ball in there. So I'm going to point, I'm going to time my run, I'm going to be on the end of it, I'm going to have this perfect near post header. It had me really excited for Jozy. Not least because, I want to see if you agree with this, I think the relationship with Jozy Altidore and Pozzuelo is going to be much different to the Jozy-Sebastian Giovinco relationship. I feel like, in a weird way, Altidore was a provider for Giovinco quite a lot. And it looks to me like it's flipped the other way around, and it's going to be more just Pozzuelo setting things up for Jozy. And that suggests to me tons and tons and tons of goals for Mr. Josmir Volmi Altidore.
I think that's a great way to put it in terms of Pozzuelo's relationship with Altidore compared to Giovinco's. I think the roles have flipped a little bit, and Altidore will be on the end of service now compared to the Giovinco days when a lot of times it would be Altidore dropping deep into midfield to collect the ball and then feed Giovinco in the final third. Now we see Pozuelo dropping into midfield or even playing between the lines a little bit higher up the field and feeding Altidore. So I think that's going to do, not only is that going to do wonders for his production, but it might even help people realize that Altidore is a very capable striker that the U.S. could use.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a bad argument, right? If he just keeps banging in really impressive-looking goals in Major League Soccer, then it'll be very hard to argue with Jozy as first-choice striker for, say, example, the Gold Cup.
Exactly.
But another guy that got a couple of goals, Will Bruin for Seattle Sounders in the absence of Rui Diaz. And at least one of those goals came, I think maybe two of those goals came from what you've identified as the sort of left side overload that Seattle Sounders love to do. Yeah,
the Seattle Sounders keep pounding on the left side and they keep scoring goals from it. I think the only game that they were really stumped a little bit this season on that left side, not that they didn't try, not that they didn't create a few chances, was against the Whitecaps a few weeks ago. But they went back to it this week and had some really good success with it against the right side of Toronto's defense.
So if I'm thinking correctly, the Bruin goal comes from, is it Smith coming late to put the cross in for Bruin for the equalizer?
I believe so. That sounds really, really right. But I watched a lot of goals this weekend, and I can't say for certain.
Well, I made quick notes, and the note I have is just for people who haven't seen this. Seattle fans will know about this, but what Seattle do is it's Rodriguez, right, is the left winger. Mm-hmm. Brad Smith is the left back who keeps essentially arriving late to cause one of the overloads. Nico Ladero, the number 10, will slide over. And then Christian Roldan, who I'm going to call the number 8, even though he's wearing number 7, fair,
yep.
will also slide over. So suddenly they always seem to have 4 guys in this area, right? I noticed on the first goal, I think, if I've got it correct, it's a Smith cross. And I see the 3 central midfielders because I'm not counting Pozuelo because he was maybe drifting higher. The 3 central midfielders for Toronto essentially shuffling over, but there's not enough of them to go over and cover everybody. And so I think it's Delgado has to mark. He charges at someone else and someone passes it along to Smith and then he has to charge at Smith. So there's literally one too many players on the left side for Seattle. Or
exactly.
Seattle have one too many players for Toronto to handle.
And that's what they want. That's what Seattle wants to do. They want to outnumber you on that left side because those players are just so good with the ball and they're so good at combining and rotating off the ball as well. I mean, Lodiero and then Rodriguez and Roldan and Smith have formed this unbelievable square. I mean, it's always rotating, so it's not a square, but I mean, this quadrilateral that just rotates through and passes through and moves through opposing defenses. And it's really beautiful to watch. It's probably my favorite. I mean, we talked about this before. I think last time we were talking, Daryl. It's kind of my favorite tactical innovation that we've seen. And it's not like teams haven't done this before, but Seattle are doing it so well. And even when Toronto tried to adjust a little bit to fix it, it didn't matter.
Yeah, let's talk about that halftime change. Even though it didn't work out, it was 1-1 at halftime and Toronto lose 3-2. I really liked the change that Greg Vanney made, which was he abandoned the back 3, right? He brought off Zavaleta. He brought off Zavaleta, his right-sided centre-back, went to a back 4, kept the midfield diamond, which is Bradley at the base, Delgado and Osorio as the sort of shuttlers, Pozuelo at the top and Altidore ahead of him. So you've got a 4-4-1. And then he added Jay Chapman as essentially just a bonus right midfielder to try and deal with the Seattle overloads. And they lost, and Seattle scored their second goal from overloading the left side. And yet, it seems like absolutely the correct move. And I'm very confused about how it's the correct move, and it didn't work out.
And I think that's just how good Seattle is at doing that left-sided overload. I think you're exactly right. The idea behind Greg Vanney's change of putting Chapman on that side and moving De Leon to maybe back a little bit.
Yeah, right back instead of right wing back, yeah.
Because De Leon is quicker than Zavaleta, probably in terms of, again, like we were talking with Elis, in terms of his ability to cover a short amount of ground and then a longer amount of ground as well. But it didn't matter, right? De Leon did do a good job a few times of snuffing out some attacks on that side, but Seattle just kept drilling and kept making progress on that left side. And it ultimately didn't have any effect. Although I do think for other teams that aren't Toronto, they might look at this game plan and say, we can adapt that to fit our personnel and maybe tweak it a little bit and try it against Seattle, because we really haven't seen any teams completely able to shut that down, other than probably Vancouver. And they sat really deep and did a really good job of tracking the movements in their low block. And for teams that don't play a low block, this could maybe be a little bit of a blueprint for how they might want to stop Seattle in the future.
The really impressive thing from a Seattle perspective is that even though Toronto had the numbers over there to deal with it, Seattle still found space. And I'm sure you can remember that second goal, the 66-minute goal that puts Seattle ahead. It's Will Bruin again. It's those quick passes, right? It's Roldan, Rodriguez, Ladero, Smith, then crosses to Bruin, and it literally happens as fast as I just said it, because about 3 of those passes are one touch. And I think the key in all of that is, are you pronouncing it Lodiero? Is that the
I don't know how to say it, Daryl.
Oh, okay.
Don't expose me like that.
All right, well, Nico, let's call him Nico.
Nico, that's perfect.
Nico manages to do that very clever thing that we saw Vidal do for Chile against the US men's national team, where you manage to be near 3 or 4 players, but deliberately not marked by any of those 3 or 4 players. So you're just in that in-between space where you're 100% available to receive the ball and make something happen. And I think that might be the key to the whole thing, is Nico's ability to find the space when everybody else is occupied with all those Seattle players.
That's exactly right. That's spot on. I think Nico's ability to find that pocket of space and really occupy defenders, like you're saying, but not really occupy them. It's kind of a weird juxtaposition of things is what makes that work. And if I can, just for a minute, there's one more thing on Seattle that I'd like to talk about. I think we've seen them so reliant in the attacking half on their left side that as teams sort of start to get more film on them and start to adapt in terms of how they defend, I think the next logical evolution for Seattle's attack is quick ball rotation over to that right side, over to Jordan Morris's side. Yeah. And I'm just sort of wondering how many weeks we're going to have to wait until we see that. Because I do think initially, once teams figure out, or maybe they won't, but if teams figure out how to stop Seattle's left side, it's going to be rough for a couple of weeks maybe until they figure out how to drill that right-sided switch into them. But if they can get that switch over to Jordan Morris's side and have Kevin Leerdam, I believe is the right back, bombing up that side as well, honestly, Seattle, there's no team out there that can stop them, at least in a defensive block. So that's going to be really interesting. I'm keeping an eye on that for future weeks, and I thought I'd mention that here because I think I haven't gotten a chance to write that down yet, and I think this is a good medium to talk about that a little bit.
Well, maybe a good time to talk about that is next week. It is Seattle Sounders against LAFC. So maybe the 2 best teams so far.
Oh yeah, by my standards, absolutely.
So this past weekend, LAFC beat FC Cincinnati 2-0. I only saw the goals and I watched a few chunks of the game as opposed to the whole game. But it looked like regular LAFC stuff. It looked like super organized in that 4-3-3. It looked like they could press and win the ball. Vela and Rossi just looked deadly every time they ran at Cincinnati defenders. And we talked about it before that LAFC just seemed like kind of a really well-drilled machine where all the parts are firing.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, I didn't see a ton of this game either against Cincinnati, but like you're saying, it's typical LAFC stuff, right? They can run at you, they can also break you down a little bit in possession. And so that matchup with Seattle is going to be fascinating in terms of, do both coaches go for it? Does one team try to sit back a little bit? Maybe LAFC will drop a little bit and then try to hit Seattle on the break, because the Sounders do tend to leave themselves a little exposed in terms of how many numbers they push forward. Yeah. But it really is going to be a chess match. And it's not just a chess match between 2 teams that don't really have a whole lot of talent to make the game interesting on an individual matchup level. But I mean, it's 2 teams that are stacked and that have interesting tactical identities going up against each other. And I really hope it's going to be a great game, and I think it should be.
All right, so I'll definitely be watching that one to see what happens, and I think we'll maybe have a feel for maybe who's the best team in Major League Soccer after that game.
Oh, that's exciting. That really is exciting.
All right, I want to touch on some other games briefly. Minnesota hosting NYCFC in their new stadium. Obviously, it was a big event, and I think the TV coverage was great. They made a big deal of the opening of is it Allianz Field?
Yep.
3-3, the Sean Johnson own goal, all kinds of craziness. I guess my question for you is, what happened in that game? Because I watched it and I was sort of scratching my head about what is going on in this game.
I watched it too, Daryl, and frankly, I was too chicken to write about it because. I mean,
that's why it's not in your column.
That's why it's not in the column. Is because I took notes on it. And I thought about it repeatedly over the weekend and tried to figure out what what to say. And it's much easier to talk about it and relay some confusion than it is to write about it. So, I mean, NYCFC went with a really interesting shape that I think was probably dictated by their injuries. They didn't play with their normal front three. It was an interesting front three with some tight wide players, sort of, if you want to call Tajori Strati and Maxi Morales wide players in that. It was like a 3-4-3 sort of shape, but it wasn't really. I don't know exactly how to explain that.
It was kind of like a 5-2-3 at points, which is
that's a much better way to describe it.
I keep seeing and keep being confused by because it just seems like a terrible idea.
And that actually, based off of NYCFC's formation, of Torrent's formation, I think there was at least one tactical trend that I noticed from this game was Minnesota sort of exploiting the space behind NYCFC's wingbacks. So when Matarrita, especially on that left wingback role, would push up, and Minnesota United were good at playing into that space behind him. Right. And I think that was a real problem for Torrent. And I think Minnesota United did a good job of exploiting that a few times, but there just wasn't enough. Minnesota United couldn't keep the ball enough to really make that a consistent pattern throughout the entire game. They exploited it a few times, but this game was end to end, a lot of action, and NYCFC held the ball for the majority of it.
What do you think of the idea that as like nerdy as you and I are about tactics, and we sort of believe, I'm assuming you also believe that tactics are the sort of key to explaining games,
right?
That maybe it's just the occasion and the emotion and the new stadium and everything that was happening. Is that a viable explanation for just how wild this game was?
I think it is, and I agree that with your premise that we're both kind of more inclined to look at the tactical aspect of the game first and let that explain away some of the different elements that we see over the course of 90 minutes. But I think it's easy for me personally to forget that there's a personal element to these games, that there's a lot of emotion that goes into these games, because I'm not a lot of times covering a team in person. I'm doing a little bit more of that with Phoenix this season, but it's easy when you're sitting and watching in an office or watching at home to forget that these are people out there playing this game, and that there's a lot, like you're saying, in a new stadium that's opening. And it was a big day for Minnesota. Yeah. And then New York City FC trying to combat that a little bit. I think it was an emotion-filled game that ended up being sort of an end-to-end open 3-3 draw.
Does that explain Sean Johnson's own goal?
Unfortunately, I mean, actually, maybe. I don't know. I watched that. I've almost been waiting for that to happen this season, for just a goalkeeper to whiff, because we're seeing so much more emphasis on them passing out of the back recently. But Sean.
My one takeaway from it is he was obviously trying to sort of what's the phrase, like open up and change direction, right, to go to the right, and just the touch was incorrect, so he ended up touching it to the right and into his own goal. But I want to almost give not credit, but like I want to give not blame to the guy who passed it back to him. I think you went back and looked for us, right? And it was Afori. Played the back pass to Sean Johnson, and Afori did the thing that I learned the hard way at a very young age, which is when you pass back to a goalkeeper, pass it back off frame, so that if there is some sort of disaster, the goalkeeper falls over or whatever, it doesn't just roll into the net, right? At worst, it's a corner kick. So Afori absolutely did the right thing, but then Sean Johnson takes that touch towards his own goal, into his own goal, and it's an own goal.
Yeah, that was really unfortunate for New York City. I don't know what else to say.
There's not much else to say, right? Because it's just so strange. I mean, maybe the one way to look at it is as Sean Johnson, US men's national team goalkeeper. I mean, we'd heard that he's been selected, say, ahead of Horvath a couple of times, for example, because of how good his touch is with his feet, right? Or at least he's better at playing the ball out of the back. It's a thing he seems to have learned over the last few years. Is this something that, like, as a men's national team fan, does this worry you that, like, this is now he's sort of marked as error-prone with his feet? Or is this just a freak occurrence that we can forget about and we don't expect it to ever happen again?
I think this is just a freak occurrence. You look at Ethan Horvath's real struggles to play the ball out against Chile, and I don't think that this own goal from Sean Johnson should condemn him in terms of his national team status, or at least I hope it doesn't, just because I don't think there are a whole lot of better options in terms of keepers playing with their feet.
I think that's a really good point. I think if you weigh the evidence of this sort of very, literally viral, it went viral, Sean Johnson own goal. Obviously, that is a big moment and it looks terrible. But against the evidence of Horvath really mishitting a lot of punts and goal kicks and everything, nothing terrible amounted from any Horvath weird failed goal kick, but there's enough evidence there that he just consistently can't do it to the level of Stefan and Johnson. So I think we just solved that one.
I think we did. I think we did, Daryl.
I like this tradition. Every time you're on the show, we solve a men's national team problem. Last time you had the Tyler Adams should play number 6 when we won't have the ball and we're defending a lot. So
I think we should get Greg in and maybe make this a 3-person conversation just so we can feed him some of our great ideas.
We'll send him the edited highlights of all the problems we solved for him. We could save him hours of work.
Perfect. I'm in.
All right, we've gone through all the games that I sort of had noted down that I wanted to talk about. Were there any other games that really stood out to you or you paid a lot of attention to or you think are worth discussing?
I think it would be maybe worth just briefly, I'd like to give a little shout out to the Rapids and DC United. I think it was nice to see Ben Olsen adjust a little bit, if, again, maybe it was only because they had a game earlier in the week and a couple of injuries as well. But DC United played almost a shape a little bit similar to New York City in terms of a 3-4 and kind of like tight front three with some central attacking midfielders playing those quote-unquote wide attacking players. And I think it was a smart tactical choice because Colorado liked to play with sort of a bunch of central midfielders. I think they matched up pretty well. But I mean, honestly, my main takeaway from that game was Chris Durkin getting to play a little bit, I think, which was a lot of fun.
That's what I was going to ask you about. So obviously, I've seen the goal. He sort of runs from deep, right, to be on the end of to exploit a massive gap. The strike is really good to the bottom left corner. But I guess my question is, how was his overall game from what you saw? Because I've only seen I'm in the DC United blackout area and I don't have Flow. So when I tried to watch it on ESPN Plus, I got that message. This is blacked out in your area. There are ways around it, but I didn't have time to figure those out. Say no more. But yeah, what did you make of Chris Durkin's overall performance? Because it's been a big thing, right? There was I actually can't remember who wrote it now. Was it Mr. Mara or was it?
Yeah, okay. It was Pablo.
Yeah, so Pablo wrote the story about how Durkin maybe had an offer from Bayer Leverkusen and maybe some other teams to go on loan to Germany with an option to buy, and DC said no, but also haven't really been playing him because he's been in the 18 but not the 11. So this was a big thing for him to start, right? So did he, apart from the goal, which is obviously good, did he make the most of his opportunity?
I think he absolutely did. We saw a lot of sort of classic Chris Durkin, or as much as it can be classic for a U20 eligible player. We saw his long passing ability and his comfort slowing down plays, which I think is an invaluable skill that a lot of players don't have. His ability to just sort of provide a calming presence on the ball is really, really, really important. And it's not something that DC United rely on a lot in terms of their general style of play, but Durkin brings that to the table, and I think that's unique. We also saw, at least I noticed, something that I hadn't seen a whole lot from him before. He looked comfortable, maybe more comfortable off the ball than I remember seeing him before. He looked more willing to move into pockets of space and to rotate into to be a little bit more mobile when the other half of that, there was still almost was a double pivot in that 3-4-3, if you want to call it that. He looked more comfortable finding space and running. And I think we saw that a tiny bit on the goal, right? I mean, he made that run from deep in midfield like you were talking about. But there were a lot of little instances like that deeper in midfield that I think is an interesting development in his game that I don't remember seeing before. So all that to say, I think Durkin played well. I don't think it's going to be enough to get him consistently into DC's lineup. I'd like that to be the case, but I think, maybe this will tide us over to the U20 World Cup, or maybe he'll get another appearance before we see him, hopefully, with the US and Poland. Yeah,
because the big worry would be if he was going to the U20 World Cup having not played for a while, right? Which, as I understand the way Tab Ramos talks about it, kind of puts his place at threat, right? He is not keen on taking players who haven't played many minutes. So just getting on the field is enough maybe to get him to the U20 World Cup, and then maybe things keep going. And long term, honestly, I mean, I've watched a lot of Durkin because he was here in Richmond for a long time, or for a season or so. I look at him as maybe the next generation of the Bradley Trapp number 6 type midfielder that Greg Berhalter loves to have at the heart of his team.
Agreed. I think Durkin, at least on paper, really does seem to fit that role. He's got a great distribution. I mean, he can hit the ball so well. I think we saw that on the goal. Like, he struck that ball so cleanly. Yeah. And I think that really does translate to other areas of this game besides just shooting. So I would love to see, maybe three years from now, we see Durkin in that role and we see the system adjusted that Tyler Adams is, in whatever role fits him best alongside Durkin. I don't know. The possibilities are exciting, absolutely. And I think Durkin could fit that role really, really well. Yeah, it could be like a Durkin-Adams double pivot, and then US Soccer could promote it as they came through the DA and their initials are DA, and they can go to town with that. That's perfect. I'm in.
It's a free marketing idea for US Soccer. I've got final question on Durkin. What did you make of his basically defensive contributions? I'm always wondering, like, is he faster than, say, Michael Bradley and Will Trapp at going and closing people down?
I think he's a little faster than Michael Bradley. I think Trapp probably still has him beat in terms of his ability, in terms of Will Trapp's ability to maybe win those one-on-one defensive battles. But Durkin had a couple of nice moments, of nice positioning moments defensively in terms of his ability to cut out passes and to intercept the ball, which I actually wasn't expecting to see either. So that was nice. But I think the defensive side of his game, just because he's not the quickest guy, right? He's not really going to be able to keep up for pace a lot of the time. So if he's in a system that can mask those defensive problems, then he's going to be great. But I think even without a system that's perfectly fit, that's perfectly tailored for his skill set, he's still serviceable. And I think that's an improvement maybe over what we've seen before.
Okay, that sounds good. Obviously, there are teams we didn't talk about today. The reason for that is that we really dislike those teams and hope they lose every game, right?
That's exactly it.
So, yeah, apologies to anyone whose team we didn't talk about. It's a big league, right? There are arguably too many teams in Major League Soccer to do a full weekend review and cover every game.
Yeah, there are. And I've kind of been trying in my column a little bit. I know I've hit several teams a bunch of times for The Athletic, but don't worry, I will get to every team, hopefully over the next few weeks. So just hang in there.
And also, I know the Red Bull Sporting KC game was big because of the Kaku incident. For those who didn't hear, Taylor and Ryan talked about the Kaku incident on Monday's Total Soccer show right at the end. So if you want to hear opinions about what Kaku did, that's the place to go find them. I won't burden you with having to have an opinion about that, Joe.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
All right. So, Joe, I guess I'll just say thank you for taking the time to talk to me once again today.
Absolutely. It's always a great time. Thank you, Daryl, for having me on.
Thank you, Joe.